I've always believed that the best disasters are the ones that never happen. That's what I was paid to do, stop the nightmare before it started. My name's Dustin. I spent the last 14 years of my life as the cybersecurity officer at a mid-sized tech firm in Chicago. Not flashy, not loud, just precise. Quietly holding the digital walls up while the world tried to burn them down. It wasn't glamorous, and no, nobody ever thanked me for the disasters that didn't happen. But they relied on me. Deep down, even the ones who didn't understand a single thing about ports or firewalls knew I was the reason their paychecks showed up on time and their servers didn't end up as headlines. You ever heard of the Verdex ransomware attack in 2021? Yeah, we almost became their poster child. Some intern clicked a PDF pretending to be from HR. One click, that's all it would have taken. But I caught the breach early, isolated the threat, shut it down, patched the vulnerability, and rebuilt the compromised machines. The only reason our CEO didn't end up explaining herself to the FTC was because I stayed up 46 hours straight, drinking cold coffee and tracing code like my life depended on it. For a long time, that meant something. People respected it, trusted it until he showed up. New boss. Name's Landon Pierce. Yes, seriously. Sounded like he should have been modeling cologne, not running a company's operations department. Young, maybe 33 at best. Always wore shiny suits, flashy watch, Bluetooth earpiece, even when he wasn't on a call. Walked in like he was auditioning for a TED Talk. He introduced himself with buzzwords: synergy, agility, digital, fluidity, whatever the hell that means. Said he was brought in to modernize the company, streamline operations, cut the fat. Apparently I was fat. First meeting, I explained our quarterly security audit plan, showed him the threat analysis. He leaned back in his chair, smirking, and said, "You're like one of those guys who builds a bunker for Y2K, huh?" Everyone laughed. I didn't. At first, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. Figured he was just trying to assert himself. New leadership, different lens. But then the changes started. Real ones. Dangerous ones. He overrode multi-factor authentication on our internal systems because it slows people down. Disabled email filters that flagged phishing attempts because he thought employees should take responsibility for what they unclick. Removed admin-level firewalls on client databases to increase response time. I objected, of course. Every time I sent reports, I flagged the risks, I cited industry standards. I even walked him through how one of his changes could allow an attacker to spoof internal credentials and wipe us clean. His response? "You need to stop catastrophizing, Dustin. We're not building a fortress, we're building progress." I swear he thought that was profound, like he'd just written the next line of his memoir. He started going around me, assigning junior IT staff tasks they weren't cleared for, skipping protocol approvals. Once, he ordered a database migration during business hours. No backups. In place. It crashed our internal systems for 6 hours. He blamed the engineers. I documented everything. Emails, system logs, approvals, overrides. I started backing up my own evidence to encrypted drives. Not because I was paranoid, but because I've seen what happens when you don't. It wasn't just professional anymore. It was personal. He made jokes about me in meetings, called me old man firewall, told the new interns I was the kind of guy who'd bring a parachute to an Uber ride. One afternoon, during a leadership huddle, I brought up the rise. In suspicious inbound traffic, he interrupted me and said, "See, this is what I mean. Dustin thinks we're one click away from Armageddon. Can we maybe try not living in fear?" Laughter again, even from people who used to respect me. That stung. Still, I stayed. Because the job wasn't about my pride, it was about the company, about the people who didn't know how close they were skating to the edge. Then came Friday. It was just past noon. I was mid-code review when I got the message. "Dustin, can you come to my office?" The HR rep was already in the room. "Effective immediately. We're terminating your employment," Landon said. "No emotion, no hesitation. Your approach to cybersecurity no longer aligns with our vision of adaptive innovation. You've become an obstacle." He said it like he was doing me a favor, like I should thank him for finally letting go of my outdated ways. I asked what triggered the decision. He pulled out a printed report I'd submitted 3 days earlier, one that highlighted the risk of leaving our backup servers exposed to public IPs. "This," he said, tapping the page, "this kind of thinking, it's fear-based. It slows us down." I was stunned, not because I didn't expect it eventually, but because it was so brazen. No warnings, no meeting, no discussion, just cut loose, for doing my job too well. I packed my things in silence. A couple of engineers looked up as I walked out. No one said a word. I guess they didn't know what to say. As I walked past the server room, I paused, glanced at the blinking lights, the humming fans, the fortress I'd quietly built piece by piece over a decade and a half. I muttered one word under my breath: "Good luck." And that was it. I walked out of the building, out of the company I'd given my best years to, out of a system I knew was about to come crashing down. I didn't say a word, but as I walked out of that building, I already knew something they didn't. The clock was ticking. Sometimes being fired isn't a failure. It's a warning to the fools who thought they were untouchable. That's what I kept telling myself the morning after I was let go. The air was crisp outside, the kind of late autumn chill that sharpens your senses. I took a long walk through the city, passing the same high-rises I used to protect from the shadows of the digital world. I didn't feel defeated. I felt alert, like a soldier dismissed just before the war begins. My name's Dustin, and while most people spend their entire careers trying to be seen, mine had always been about what shouldn't be seen. Unnoticed threats, invisible walls, silent alarms. That was my realm, not flashy, not loud, just secure. Until someone decided that wasn't enough anymore. The young prodigy who took my place, my former boss, in his designer sneakers and startup lingo, he saw cybersecurity as a speed bump. To him, every warning I gave was a delay, every safeguard a cage. I was the dinosaur holding back progress, and so he cut the chain. What he didn't realize was I was the only thing keeping the wolves out. It started exactly 2 days after I left. A small mention buried in a LinkedIn post: "Unexpected service outages this morning. Appreciate everyone's patience as we sort through a minor issue." Harmless on the surface, but I knew better. Companies don't post that kind of thing unless the issue is burning a little hotter than they admit. And if they're the ones posting, not PR, not customer service, then it's panic mode. I didn't comment, didn't like, just bookmarked the post and kept scrolling. By noon, the trickle had become a stream. A few clients posted on industry forums, login problems, data rollbacks, missing dashboards. One even wrote, "Hey, company, why's my billing history from October just gone?" I sipped my coffee and checked the time, just as I expected. You see, before I was escorted out of that building, I made sure to preserve a full copy of the system change logs for the last 90 days on a personal drive, stored legally and ethically as part of my professional documentation, just in case HR ever needed context, because when you're working with enterprise networks, breadcrumbs matter. And I knew the exact moment the new boss, let's call him Trevor, disabled our firewall sandboxing protocol. It wasn't subtle. He clicked past the warning banner, ignored the pop-up that literally said, "Are you sure?" and forced it off. Said it was too slow and clunky. That was 3 weeks ago. I documented it, I flagged it, I emailed him twice. I even outlined the risk. Sandboxing was our first line of defense against executable malware. You turn that off, and suddenly every attachment is a potential landmine. Guess what had happened now? A ransomware payload. Classic Trojan route sent. via a spear phishing email disguised as a vendor invoice. It used a known vulnerability in an outdated PDF parser, which just so happened to be patched in an update I'd recommended, that Trevor skipped to save time. The virus encrypted their shared drive within hours. Worse, it had silently exfiltrated a chunk of client data before locking things down. How do I know? Because the ransomware group posted a teaser on the dark web. Just a taste, partial records, anonymized client metadata. Enough to prove they had it, enough to start a bidding war if the company refused to pay. And the best part? The exploit vector, the exact PDF signature, matched the one I flagged 4 weeks ago, logged in a report titled High Risk, Unpatched Entry Point via Legacy Viewer. Trevor had called it irrelevant. Overkill, even. No one uses PDFs like that anymore, he scoffed in the all-hands meeting. Apparently someone still did, inside the company. Chaos had taken hold. I got the play-by-play through private DMs. Some of my former teammates, quiet, loyal folks who didn't deserve any of this, kept me in the loop. They knew I wouldn't rub it in. That's not my style. Everything's locked, one message read. Even the backups. They're saying it's a technical hiccup, but it's full-on disaster mode. Another. Trevor tried to reroute email through an old server. Didn't work. Now clients are complaining. He's yelling at IT like we caused this. No recovery plan, no contingency testing, no air-gapped backups, because the cloud sync was faster, Trevor said. He killed the very disaster plan I'd been building for 2 years, the one we simulated every quarter, the one that could have had them back online in hours. Instead, they were flying blind. No dashboards, no ticketing system, no client history. Just a blinking cursor on a black terminal screen, asking for a Bitcoin wallet address. I watched from my apartment. Laptop open, news tabs refreshing like a stockbroker during a crash. Still no public admission, still no breach disclosure. But the signs were there, stock price dipping, client chatter increasing, an anonymous tweet from someone claiming to be an insider. When you fire the guy who knew how to keep the castle safe, don't be surprised. When the gates collapse, I didn't retweet it, but I smiled. Because cybersecurity isn't about being paranoid, it's about being prepared. You don't lock your doors because you expect someone to break in. You do it so that if they try, they fail. Trevor never got that. He thought a shiny user interface was more important than a secure back-end. He wanted things fast, not safe. Now, he had neither, and here's the kicker. The attackers had installed a backdoor, a subtle one, buried deep in a deprecated admin panel I'd flagged for removal in Q3. Left open because deprecating it would break legacy functions. Trevor argued it was through that panel that the attackers wormed their way in. And as of day 2, that backdoor was still open. How do I know? Well, let's just say old habits die hard. And while I no longer had access to the company's internal systems, I had set up passive monitoring alerts through public DNS records and security sensors, perfectly legal, perfectly normal for any cybersecurity professional keeping tabs on threat vectors. A certain spike in unexpected traffic, a DNS call to an Eastern European IP. It all lined up. They hadn't even found the hole yet. By day 3, the headlines finally hit. Mid-sized tech firm hit with major cyber attack. Services down, data potentially compromised. The article quoted a spokesperson who claimed they were working closely with cybersecurity experts to evaluate the extent of the incident. Translation: they were drowning, and the most bitter part, Trevor had the nerve to spin it, sent a company-wide email, screenshotted and forwarded to me, blaming legacy systems and unforeseen vulnerabilities. Legacy? You mean the systems you refuse to update? The same ones I gave you 3 risk reports about, unforeseen. There were 5 warnings. In writing, but I wasn't angry. Not really. There's a strange calm that comes with knowing you were right. not just professionally, but morally. I didn't leave that place with rage in my chest. I left with clarity. I did my job. I warned them. And they ignored me. Actions have consequences, and now the breach had only just begun. And the worst part, they had no idea where the back door was. But I did. The first few days after a cyber attack are always a blur, but this one was different. This wasn't a typical glitch or a minor breach. This was a disaster, a catastrophic failure of every system the company had relied on. By the time the news broke, the full extent of the damage was clear. The headlines screamed across every major news outlet. Tech firm hit with major cyber attack, sensitive client data leaked, financial records corrupted. Social media lit up with rumors. And then, facts, clients, the ones who had once sworn loyalty to the company, began pulling out. One by one, I saw them drop from the ranks. We're suspending all projects with company. Investors who had once rallied around Trevor's vision were now threatening lawsuits, accusing the firm of gross negligence. The stock, if you can even call it that, plummeted. The servers still locked. The ransomware demand still sitting at a cool $20 million in Bitcoin. The encrypted files, the ones that held the keys to the company's survival, completely inaccessible. It was the kind of day I'd expected, but not like this. Inside the company, the new boss was starting to crack. Trevor had been all smiles and slick talks in the beginning, but now he was drowning, and his desperation was bleeding through every email, every frantic phone call. I could hear the panic in the messages, even if I wasn't there to see it firsthand. I've called in consultants. We need someone who understands the systems inside and out, he'd said in a meeting, ignoring the fact that the person who did understand the systems inside and out was sitting in his living room, just one click away. The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. What Trevor didn't realize was that the more he tried to patch things up, the worse he made it. The backups, corrupted. The recovery plan, non-existent. Every time they tried to bring a server online, they ended up triggering another ransomware lockout. It was like watching someone try to stop a flood with a sponge. There were whispers from within the company. One of my former colleagues texted me. He fired Lisa, said it was her fault for not catching it earlier. Now he's asking for help from you. Funny how that works. Lisa was the network administrator, and I knew her well. I also knew she had nothing to do with this. Trevor's panic had turned into blame, and he needed someone to throw under the bus. He couldn't have possibly known that Lisa had followed my last instructions to the letter. I always left detailed notes on every system update, but Trevor didn't care about detail. He cared about perception. So what did Trevor do? He fired the people who had been doing their jobs right, and then he went looking for the one person who could save him, me. I had known this was coming, not the specifics, but the general course of events. I had seen it happen before. Companies taking risks they didn't fully understand, driven by the short-sighted ambitions of someone at the top who thought they knew better than the professionals. But it wasn't just about the firm's failure. This was about my failure to prevent it. Well, it wasn't really my failure, was it? In fact, I had been ahead of the game. I'd built a firewall system that Trevor had disabled after just a few weeks on the job. I'd flagged the vulnerability that had just been exploited. I'd even anticipated that, should the worst happen, I'd need to safeguard myself professionally. I was always the one who planned for worst-case scenarios. Flashbacks came to me in waves, one after the other. I had designed that firewall system, a robust, layered defense that would have kept the attack at bay. But Trevor, in his streamlined efficiency mindset, saw it as a bottleneck, so he had disabled it. He'd claimed it was clunky, that it was slowing down the network. What he didn't realize was that it wasn't just slowing down the network. It was the only thing between them, and an unmitigated disaster. Then there was the offline backup drive, an encrypted archive I'd maintained, stored on a completely separate network, far from the company's reach. It wasn't even tied to the company's systems. I'd anticipated this exact scenario. No one knew about it, not even Trevor. I had quietly tucked it away in the event of a catastrophic failure, keeping the logs encrypted and off the grid. If they needed access, they'd have to go through me. But of course, they wouldn't even know to ask for it. There were other things too, small safeguards. One of the best ones was the custom ethical failsafe protocol I'd left behind. It wasn't sabotage. I didn't design it to wreck anything, but it would have made it very hard for anyone to recover the systems without my involvement, legally speaking. The kind of protection a professional like me would need if they were ever caught in a situation like this. Funny thing about that ethical failsafe, it was activated the moment I was fired. Without my approval, no one could move forward with recovery plans. No one could even access the backup drives I'd personally encrypted. It didn't take long for my phone to buzz. At first, it was just one of my old colleagues asking if I could lend a hand. They were still in the thick of it, lost, but trying to hold on. I didn't respond right away. Let them stew. Let them feel the weight of their decisions. I'd been nice enough to document every step, every safeguard, and every warning, and then the call came. Trevor. He didn't waste time. "Dustin," he said, his voice strained, "I need your help. We can't do this without you. I know I made a mistake, but please, we need you." It was funny. 2 weeks ago, I was the one who was expendable. Now I was their only hope. "Funny," I said with just the right amount of calm. 2 weeks ago, I was a liability. Now I'm your savior." The internal debate started almost immediately. A part of me still cared for the team. The good people, the ones who didn't have a say in what was going on. I wanted to help them. I always had. They didn't deserve the chaos Trevor had unleashed. But another part of me, the part that was tired of being overlooked, the part that had seen this train wreck coming, saw an opportunity. I wasn't going to just walk in and fix things. No. This was my moment, my chance to rewrite the narrative. I'd built this company's infrastructure, but I'd never truly been appreciated for it. Now I had the leverage. I had the keys. I was the one who knew the back door. And Trevor didn't even realize he was still sitting in front of it. The question was, should I help them? As I sat in my chair, the weight of the decision settling in, the next few moments felt almost deliberate. This wasn't about petty revenge. This wasn't about rubbing Trevor's face in his mistakes. This was about justice, about showing the world what happens when the right people are ignored. I had the knowledge, I had the tools, and now I had the upper hand. They wanted the keys to the kingdom, and this time, I'd be the one setting the access permissions. It was quiet for a while after Trevor's call. I let the weight of his request hang in the air, unspoken, just the way I liked it. He had tried everything. Consultants who were out of their depth, internal teams who had no clue, and desperate measures that only made things worse. Now it was my turn to answer, but on my terms. It wasn't about me coming back. It wasn't about regaining my position. I'd already made peace with that. This was about me proving beyond any doubt that I was the only person who could fix what had gone wrong. This was about demonstrating my value, not through anger, but through professionalism and strategy, and, in the process, ensuring that no one would ever forget who they had underestimated. I drafted my reply calmly, as though I were reviewing a simple request for consultation. No emotion, no bitterness. Just pure, clinical precision. "Trevor," I wrote, "I understand the gravity of the situation. You've made it clear that you require assistance, and I'm the only one capable of resolving this crisis. However, I will not return as an employee. My terms are as follows. A consulting fee of $500,000, payable upon completion of the restoration. Full indemnity for all potential legal claims resulting from this breach. A public acknowledgement of my previous warnings and contributions to the company's security protocols, as well as the immediate deactivation of the security measures I had in place before my departure. My continued involvement will be limited to this engagement. I will restore your systems, implement proper security measures, and then leave. There will be no long-term employment contract. I waited for Trevor's response. The irony was thick. A man who had dismissed me, who had called me overcautious and paranoid, now had no other option but to rely on me for his company's survival. In my hands was the control to restore order, and I wasn't going to waste it. A few hours later, the reply came. "I'll approve the terms," Trevor wrote, his tone barely masking the discomfort of swallowing his pride. "But we'll need to make a public statement, maybe even an apology to the board. We need to salvage whatever's left. I don't expect this to be easy, but you're the only one who can fix this." I could almost hear the resignation in his words. He had no choice. He had to accept, even if he hated it. And for the first time, he understood that the person he had once thought was expendable was now his lifeline. I met with the board the following day, not as an employee, but as an external consultant. The room was tense, their collective gaze fixated on me as though I were some sort of savior. There were no thank yous or welcome back pleasantries, just the raw, palpable relief that they were about to be spared further disaster. Trevor was there, sitting stiffly, his shoulders hunched with the weight of his earlier mistakes. He didn't look at me and I didn't look at him. There was no need. I wasn't here for apologies. I was here to fix what he had broken, and I intended to do it with absolute professionalism. I set to work immediately. First, I isolated the breach. The back door had been left open too long, but I wasn't worried. I knew the system inside and out. The tools I needed to neutralize the attack were already in place, sitting on encrypted drives, just as I had planned. With precision, I restored the backups, kept safe in an offline network, untouched by the malware. While everyone else scrambled to put out fires, I moved in silence, undoing the damage piece by piece. In the process, something began to shift. The board members, who had once been skeptical of my approach, now began to look at me with a new respect. Some of them even asked for advice, inquiring about how they could prevent a breach like this from happening again. The fact that I was the one with the answers, while Trevor was still fumbling through his disaster recovery plans, spoke volumes. And then came the real moment of truth. The system was secured, the breach isolated, and the backups restored. The ransomware demand? Gone. The stolen data? No longer a threat. I wasn't done, though, not yet. I still had work to do. I left behind detailed, ironclad security protocols, clear instructions, layered defenses, and a hard reset of their internal systems. It was an impenetrable framework. No more shortcuts. No more disabling firewalls. No more compromising security for speed. They'd learned the hard way that negligence came with a cost. As I handed over the final report, I couldn't help but notice a subtle shift in the room. People looked at me differently now, no longer the too careful guy who'd been fired. For holding the company back, I was now the person who had saved them all from irreparable damage. I was no longer invisible. In fact, one of the board members, an older gentleman who'd never given me the time of day before, leaned in and quietly said, "You know, I think we'll be rethinking our leadership. Trevor may have been the face, but you've shown us what real leadership looks like." As the days passed, I did what I had come to do. I fixed their mess, ensured their systems were secure, and walked away, no strings attached. It was almost poetic. The same people who had once seen me as a liability were now acknowledging that I was the one who had prevented the company from sinking entirely. I didn't stay to gloat, nor did I want to. The real reward was the quiet satisfaction of knowing that I had done things the right way and that my expertise had triumphed in the end. Reflecting on everything, I realized something. Being fired had been the best thing that had ever happened. To me, it had forced me to break free, to stop working for a company that never truly valued my contributions. Now, I was in control. I had regained my worth, not by sabotaging anyone, but by proving that my value was far greater than they had ever understood, and with that I began to build something new, a cybersecurity firm of my own. I wasn't in this for the glory or the fame. I just wanted to work with companies who understood the value of professionals, the ones who saw the quiet ones in the room and respected them. A few old colleagues reached out, asking if they could join me. Some of them had stayed behind at the company, but their own frustration was beginning to mirror mine. We would work together, not as underlings, but as equals, building something far stronger than anything I had left behind. As for Trevor, the word on the street was that the board was already considering a change in leadership. His reckless decisions, his arrogance, and his complete failure to understand the technical side of his own company had made him a liability. There was no way he could recover from this. The company, with all its potential, had been saved, not by the person who had been placed at the top, but by the one who had always known what it would take to fix things. I'll never forget the call I got from one of Trevor's former colleagues shortly after I walked away. "We need someone like you," they said, their voice cautious but sincere. "If you ever want to work with us, seriously, you know where to find us." They fired me for being too careful. Turns out I was the firewall they needed all along. And that, my friends, is why you should always respect the quiet ones in the room, especially the ones who know how to shut down a system with a single keystroke.